For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. National Nurses United in Puerto Rico, with its volunteer RN emergency response network, says that federal relief efforts are glacially slow. The nurses' union is warning of dire conditions threatening a growing health calamity for millions. They say while they hear boasts of great response, the reality on the ground is far different. That reality includes people who have yet to get any food, water, or other supplies from FEMA or any other agency. People standing in line for hours in blistering heat for water and food only to find federal disaster officials bringing paperwork to collect data instead. A breakout of leptospirosis, a dangerous, deadly bacterial disease. The nurses say the harsh reality is a woefully inadequate government response in Puerto Rico. At least 120 Teamsters are on the ground in Puerto Rico trying to deliver relief supplies, but the Teamsters say it's even worse than it appears in media accounts. Traffic lights out, much of the power still out, very hot conditions. Teamsters General President Jim Hoffa says Teamsters volunteers are working in critical roles of supply delivery, sanitation support, hooking up generators, and debris removal following the devastation wrought by Hurricane Maria. Faculty at the University of Minnesota are shifting tactics in a push for worker power and organization at the university. The Minnesota Court of Appeals ruled in September barring tenured and non-tenured faculty from joining together in solidarity in one union bargaining unit. Minnesota Academics United, affiliated with SEIU Local 284, had filed for the union election back in January of 2016. Instead of appealing that court decision, faculty will instead form a workers' association. In a posted union video, faculty like Marta Shore explained some of the issues driving faculty to want to organize at the University of Minnesota.
In the past 10 years, I have seen class sizes increases and tuition increase. When I was a TA in 2005, our labs were 25 students, so I was responsible for 50 students. I got to know the students. The class I'm teaching this fall has 200 students.
Shared governance of the university is one of the principles at stake as faculty organizes. Christian Karab said one problem in higher ed is market-driven governance without sharing power with faculty.
Everything has to be understood in a business paradigm. That's fundamentally inconsistent with the whole idea of a public research institution.
WIN is America's multimedia news voice for workers.
We need to make more money. You know, what they're paying us, the greedy corporation, they just want to pay us what they want to pay us. And it's not right.
We are sick of an economy and a democracy that are rigged against us.
Support WIN's worker news mission at workersindependentnews.com. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The stand thing still front and center. The do what we say or we're going to come and get you front and center. And look, We, as a country for years, at least through most of my life, used to look at authoritarian regimes who demand compliance and say this isn't who we are, and thank goodness we're not them, and how they should change. And, well, it appears that we're not so much better after all. And what's interesting to me is, you see the memes on the right about North Korea and how everyone has to walk in lockstep. It seems that's exactly what we're getting out of this White House. You look on Sunday with the stunt that Mike Pence pulled. They're talking about up to $2 million now, the cost of that little stunt. $2 million of your tax dollars. Congratulations, you paid for it. It was a beautiful stunt, by the way. It was well executed until Trump let the cat out of the bag. But here's the thing. Today I was thinking about, I have conservative friends who hate government. They're really very fearful of government. And it dawned on me again. It's not like I had this great epiphany. I've known this. But it dawned on me again today that they fear and hate government because of the way they run it, the way that they view the world and how they view government should work, which is in this kind of very authoritarian kind of way. Do what we say or you will be punished by us. And that was no more front and center than with Trump's tweet this morning, where he asked, why is the NFL getting massive tax breaks while at the same time disrespecting our anthem, flag, and country? Change the law. So, again, understand, these are the people who believe in freedom, love the Constitution, all of that stuff. Or so they say. Again, it's freedom as long as you do what we tell you to do. It's this kind of stuff that really is very scary about Trump. While, most of the time he's a buffoon and does really dumb stuff and kind of dopey and all over the map, it's this kind of power that he wields, that he can put a government agency on track. You remember the IRS thing? You remember how conservatives went crazy that Obama was using the IRS against us? Turns out he wasn't. Turns out the IRS was going after everyone who was trying to use the tax-free exemption to get their word out, to do their bidding, be it political or otherwise. But the conservatives, they being the good victims, because they play the victim really well. They play the disadvantaged, the downtrodden. They play the victim card. They play it masterfully. So when this comes out, you start thinking about it. Is he going to use the IRS to go after the NFL, to force them to go after these players? All because they had the audacity to kneel down. Now, again, you could argue that this is an employment issue. You could argue that this is something the NFL should deal with. There's an argument to be made. But when the President of the United States, with the full force of the federal government, singles people out, you kind of have to wonder. You kind of have to wonder if the power is not being abused. And again, I look at another example, a report yesterday in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Evidently, an assistant professor of history at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV. Evidently, there was a secret recording done of her talking about the shooting and how, what the president says affects all of us, and how, she said that, what he says, people are going to die. She said, presidents can encourage violence or discourage violence. And what she said is she got this guy who seems to be encouraging violence. And, as I read her statement, I'm going, I don't know that it's something I would have apologized over. She said, look, some of us won't be affected by this presidency, but others are going to die. She points to, she says, look at Trump has threatened to declare violence against North Korea and other places, and that words, especially if coming from someone who is the president, has consequences. She said, I don't know that these events would have inevitably happened or whether or not he got elected, but he has rhetorical power. Every president has encouraged or discouraged violence. So far, all he's done is encouraged. I don't find anything offensive in that statement. I find nothing wrong with that statement. It is something that is meant to, in my view, as someone who's sat in classrooms before, begin to have a conversation. Look, if you disagree with it in a place where you have academic freedom, the ability to have this discussion, you then push back on that. So what does the White House do? Again, this is stuff that happens in classrooms and in bar rooms and clubs all across this country. Not every one of them rises to the level of the White House. The White House press secretary, Sarah Huckleberry Sanders, she says that, she should be ashamed of herself and the university should look into it. What a terrible example she sets for students. And I'm going, wait a second. Having a conversation is a terrible example? Expressing one's opinion and thought, that's a terrible example. And the fact that, she's now saying the university should be looking into this. You now have the White House weighing into an employment situation where, do what we say. Do what we say. Stay in line or we're coming for you. And again, you had the president today, and you all of this stuff, it just seems every single day there's stuff like this. Jameel Hill, she's an ESPN reporter. I've never actually seen her. I've never seen her reporting, but she was talking about the Dallas Cowboys, and it was brought up that someone should boycott the advertisers for the Cowboys because of Jerry Jones saying that everyone's going to stand, or if they don't stand, they're going to be benched. She was suspended for 2 weeks for agreeing or having a conversation around that, which is mind-blowingly ignorant. And the reality is ESPN, they should unionize and they should have contractual and grievance rights, and they should fight this. But you have the President of the United States, the president who has North Korea to worry about, has China to worry about, has Puerto Rico to worry about, has all of this stuff that he's evidently not doing well. He decides it's important at 6:42 a.m. this morning to tweet out with Jameel Hill at the mic, it's no wonder ESPN ratings have tanked. In fact, tanked so badly, it's the talk of the industry. And again, a guy who's so fascinated with ratings, I wonder if he's looked at his own. Now, here's the problem with this. Again, you come back to what that UNLV professor said about encouraging or discouraging violence. The dim-witted base, the knuckle-dragging mouth breathers who still think Trump is their guy. They see this stuff. And you have to wonder when it's going to boil over. When the white supremacists who he called, fine people, very fine people, when do they take this attack, this pointing at this woman, and say, well, let's take her out? You think I'm kidding? I mean, this is how this rhetoric from the White House can cause a powder keg to explode. And, the more you look at the unhinged nature of what's coming out of the White House, the more you have to look at Corker and go, hey, Bob, it's time for you and the other 51 Republicans to actually do something to rein this in. Now, these are just individual instances. You look at what's going on with North Korea and you go, at some point, do you not rein this lunatic in? I mean, the fact that he can't let things go. I was thinking about this, as I was preparing today. Had Obama had the kind of temperament this guy's got, because look, those of you who remember the last 8 years under President Obama, which were good years, which were calm years, which were reasonable, which were moving us somewhat forward. Had every time a right-wing lunatic said something stupid, had he gone to the Twitters and complained or whined or, done an interview to call individuals like this out, we would have had chaos. And I think, you go back to President Obama's the beginning. He did weigh in on something and it blew up. And he learned. He learned not to get involved in everything that happens. This president hasn't figured that out. And I don't know that he's capable. I seriously don't know that he is capable of learning. Every story I've read, every report I've read of people who've sat down with him, his ghostwriter, his alter ego, is saying, look, be afraid. This guy's insane. On the ratings front, since ESPN's tanked, the industry's talking about it, evidently coming out of the Twitter account, it appears that President Trump's approval ratings have fallen in all 50 states since January. A new Morning Consult poll out found that in September, 43% of people that they polled approved, 52% disapproved. That is down from the Morning Consult poll back in January, where 49% approved and 39% disapproved. According to the new poll, a majority of voters in 25 states said that they disapproved of Trump's job performance. And of those states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Pennsylvania. 51% of voters in Nevada and Arizona also disapproved of his performance. Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Pennsylvania, the wall that won him the election. And you got to wonder, is it buyer's remorse? Because look, he won Pennsylvania by a couple thousand votes, won Wisconsin and Michigan by a couple of thousand votes. You got to wonder. And at some point, do we wake up to it? Scary, scary times, my friends. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. When we come back, we're going to talk about the EPA, the secret phone booth. Scott Pruitt. Good stuff. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. At 2:02 in the afternoon, President Woodrow Wilson at the White House touched off an explosion at the Gamboa Dike in Panama. With that touch of a button, the last barrier to joining the waters of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Panama Canal went up in smoke. The Chicago Tribune described the scene in Panama, writing, quote, "Then suddenly came the muffled roar of the discharge of 1,600 pounds of dynamite, which sent a shower of water, mud, and rock high into the air. Spreading out as it went upward, the whole heavily veiled into a cloud of smoke. As water began to pour through the rent made by the explosion, the crowd sent up a great cheer. It was a noteworthy moment in the construction of the canal, but that moment came at a staggering cost of workers' lives. For more than 20 years, the French and then the United States worked on the canal project. The U.S. phase lasted for a decade. As many as 45,000 workers toiled on the canal during the peak years of construction. These workers came from the United States, Europe, Asia, and Panama. West Indians formed the core of the work crews. These workers faced stifling heat, brutal working conditions, and poor accommodations. Workers had to contend with ravaging disease, poisonous snakes, and torrential rains. Workers also faced racial discrimination. For example, West Indian workers earned half the hourly wages of U.S. and European workers. They also lived in much more crowded barracks. Worker deaths were so frequent that death or funerary trains made continual runs to bring the bodies away from the construction site. It is estimated that more than 27,000 men died building the canal. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The way to meet the challenge of energy and global climate change is through technology. And the United States is in the lead. The world is on the verge of great breakthroughs that will help us become better stewards of the environment.
And I'm not missing a thing. Watching the full moon crossing the range, riding the storm out.
Yeah, I know it's really screwed up to say. I hate it. I hate the fact that I even think that, maybe the George W. Bush years weren't so horrible. Now look, the Iraq War, Afghanistan, all of that. But I never got the sense he was completely insane. Warmonger, yes, get that. Rummy's puppet, Cheney's puppet, yeah, got that. But not insane. Almost wanting to try and do something close to right. I don't know. But you think back to that, and there was Bush was an oil guy. He was in bed with the oil companies, yes, but at least he gave some appearance that he cared about the environment and cared about other things. Thanks to the Donald, we're making America great again. It's MAGA, man, making America dirty again. Or morons. I don't know. Evidently, Scott Pruitt, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, who needs 24-hour protection and his own secure phone booth. Evidently, he is going to sign today a repeal of the Clean Power Plan that went into effect during the Obama era to curb greenhouse gas emissions from power plants, which means we're going back to coal. And I don't know that that's actually going to happen, but that's their goal. Their goal is, we're gonna go through on those promises to make coal great again, and with paying a little lip service to the miners in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, Kentucky. Reality check. We're already on the natural gas thing. They're already building the power plants much cheaper, much less labor intensive. We're already down that road. And to me, again, I've been saying for a long time, Obama didn't kill coal. Marcellus Shale did. The Utica Shale did. The Bakken oil. All of these things. That's what killed coal. We're still blowing mountains up and taking coal off the top, but we're shipping that to China. And eventually China is going to get away from it too. So eventually all those jobs are going to be lost. And we know that. But you've got politicians like Trump who, we have to play the political pandering game. And this is where Hillary completely lost it in West Virginia. When she said, the coal mining jobs are gone, we have to move on to other things and do job training and all that stuff. Completely lost it there. But I look at this and you go, not surprising that when you have an administration who's moving in a very decidedly pro-business direction, that, we're gonna make, dirty air great again. We're gonna make dirty water, great again. We're gonna make slave wage conditions, great again. We're going in all of the wrong directions. And to me, at some point, you have to wake up and go, hey, I get the fact that we were going to put people back to work. I get the fact that the argument was we're going to have trade policy that's going to benefit us. I get that. But at what condition? At what cost? Right now we're seeing, people being appointed to different regulatory bodies. The woman who was, who's been sued being sued for wage theft actually being in charge of enforcing wage theft. You go, what? The guy who was instrumental in suing to fire the Patco workers back during the Reagan era, now the general counsel for the NLRB. You go through some of this stuff and you just go, the former coal baron CEO of, I think it was Rhino Resources, now the head of mine safety and health. You go, how is that possible? You know, that fox in the henhouse thing, I mean, that isn't even an adequate analogy. And now you see you've got this Janet Dillon, who is Janet Dillon and this Daniel Gage, who are Trump's picks to head up the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Now understand, the EEOC, their job is to look into, civil rights cases, they're to look into employment cases, to make sure that, on the job, people have equal access to employment. Ms. Dillon, oddly enough, served as general counsel for JCPenney's, United Airway, Burlington Stores, also chaired the Retail Litigation Center. That's the industry group that constantly sued the EEOC for being too stringent in enforcing its rules. Are you getting this? Is this sinking in that every person that Trump is putting into a position of regulatory authority, of job protection, of enforcement, are people who don't believe in the mission of the agency? People who have sued that agency for doing its job. I look at Mr. Gade, who evidently lost a leg while serving in Iraq. He has argued that disability benefits are making wounded veterans dependent on the government. And again, I go back to this weird world. And I've heard this argument before about people with disabilities that, well, we just don't give them the chance to succeed. We make them dependent on government. Now, if the private sector would hire them without incentive, they would. If they could get up and work like everyone else without their disabilities, they would. I seriously, there's part of me that looks at this and goes, we want people to be active in the workplace. We want people to have opportunity. But the idea that somehow by having benefits to help these folks is making them dependent is just, to me, one of these bridges too far. And you got to wonder, once in place, once in power, what will they do to these agencies? And again, who's going to suffer under it? We know that the next several years are going to be very difficult for workers in this country. We know it. You're going to have a National Labor Relations Board packed with management side attorneys. You're going to have decisions that for a generation are going to be in place that are going to be detrimental to workers. You see the attacks coming from the Supreme Court. Things are going to be coming through the legislature. All of this stuff kind of points into this direction where in the next 5 to 10 years, you're looking at major desperation and chaos. And for those of us who've been saying for a very long time, maybe what needs to happen is we come to the reality that industrial peace is indeed dead. And that it's going to be another generation of workers and citizens who are going to have to take to the streets and fight this stuff again. The take a knee thing, while it's not something that I would do, one, because as I've said, it's not my protest. I support their right to kneel. I'm not doing it. You look at the kind of pushback that just that has. And someone sent me an email with this great photo or it was actually a cartoon of, of a Trump slave master kind of character, seeing a black guy in a field, during the slavery era saying, "Get up!" And you see them, during the lunch counter era of the 1960s, having a white guy screaming at a black guy saying, "Get up!" And now you've got Trump, screaming at the NFL guy saying, "Get up!" And you're talking nonviolent protest. How is that? How are they going to be cracked down on in this new world order? Because I'll tell you, as I'm looking at and as I'm watching this stuff play out, and the people that they're putting into these positions, we should all be very, very concerned. And there's also part of me that goes, you know what? Maybe we deserve what we're going to get. I'll take a quick break. Right back.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report. I'm Mark Boulanger. In the United Kingdom, the austerity program of the Conservative government in the past few years has been disproportionately affecting people of colour. And while labor unions have been doing their best to fight back, sometimes it takes new approaches to address the issue. One of those new approaches is to create groups which can work in parallel with the labor movement. That was the strategy adopted by a group in the UK called Black Activists Rising Against the Cuts, more commonly known by its acronym BARAC. Zita Holborn is a vice president of the Public and Commercial Services Union in the UK. She is also a co-founder of BARAC. She spoke at a recent forum on social justice issues organized by the Canadian Union of Public Employees.
BARAC was formed and established. We established it because I recognised that the work that I've been doing as a trade union activist, campaigning against cuts that had come under a former previous Labour government, different leadership then than we have now, had already adversely, disproportionately impacted on black workers. And I should explain that when I use the term black, it's used in its broadest political sense to encompass everybody that is a person of colour. So that's how we use the term politically in the UK. And I recognise that under the new Tory government that we were going to face huge austerity and cuts, and that was going to have a massive disproportionate impact, not just on black workers, but on black service users and communities. And I wanted to do more than I could do within my own union. We fight for freedom and justice and equality in trade unions, but we're also institutions and we also have bureaucracy, right? So I wanted to be able to organise outside of that structure, but alongside it at the same time, and work within the trade union movement that I'm a part of, but also have that freedom to stand up and speak out and campaign with others. And what we find in the trade union movement is black workers join proportionately in the UK, but the higher you go up through the structures, the less of us there are. So there are barriers to participation and there is underrepresentation in our movement. And that means that we don't necessarily have the voices to make sure that our experience is heard at the highest levels and in the decision-making bodies, because that's fundamental and key. If you're not involved in the decision-making bodies, obviously I am as an individual, but across the board, not everybody is. So we formed BARAC because we wanted to bring communities, trade unions, workers, service users together in a way that actually they hadn't historically worked together in the UK. So we always had community organisations and community activists, but they weren't necessarily working with trade unions, and trade unions weren't necessarily working with them. because we recognise that this is a broader scale than anything we'd ever seen before. And if we didn't mobilise and organise our black communities, then we wouldn't be empowered and ready for that fight that we needed to have. We were literally bombarded with people asking for support and help. And part of what we did when we were initially established is to try and empower people. So we didn't want to get bogged down with the bureaucracy of an organisation and structure. We said, if you're a group of black people in any city or town, whether you're in Manchester or Birmingham, you call yourselves Barrack, you mobilise, you organise, we'll help you do that. But also what we'll do is we'll provide you with the tools and the education so that you feel empowered, you understand how structures work, how the law works, how policies work, and you can empower yourselves and your local community to stand up to what's happening to you, but also be part of a broader movement, which is a national organisation. So you have that sort of backing behind you to say you're part of our organisation. What we thought was important is that our voices are heard across the anti-austerity movement.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Here's some good news. If you needed a little good news for the day, it turns out that hackers from North Korea, and you go, really? You put this stuff on the web? Put this stuff where it's able to be hacked? Answer, yes. Evidently, hackers from North Korea have stolen a large cache of military documents from South Korea. Evidently, the large cache had a plan to assassinate Kim Jong-un. And it ties us in with this. It was basically all of the wartime contingency plans, because you're always wargaming this stuff. There's always a plan. I'm sure we've got plans to fight our allies. But here you had, all of these documents on how we would go about fighting in North Korea. Again, when we start the war, and I think the Donald has it in his head that he wants to, because, hey, there's only one way to deal with people like that. So you got to wonder. And it got me thinking about, just in the world that we live in, where everything seems to be on the web, and somehow we think that it's, well, it's secure. I've got a password. It's encrypted. I have a friend who got his email hacked, and it's amazing how much we as a society rely on electronic media. I go back to something my grandfather always said. He said, you never write something that you don't want your grandmother to read. You never put something down on you never have it documented, never recording, written down. You never do something that you don't want her to see. And it's one of those things where you got caught with, I forget what it was. It was a letter that someone had written me, and it was not a good letter. Or it was actually a great letter, but not for your grandmother to read. And it was this lecture about you make sure that this stuff doesn't happen. And it was one of those life lessons that you go, because I don't do this. If someone were to hack my email, they'd get a lot of really boring emails. If I have something that is salacious, or something that is controversial, or something that I don't want my grandmother to read or know about, I'll pick up the phone and call somebody, or I'll have a face-to-face conversation. And it's gotten me wondering if maybe we've gotten so technologically advanced that we're going to end up back in the Stone Age, where we're only going to send things with couriers, and it'll be like Mission Impossible. As soon as the person who's supposed to see it reads it, it explodes. You have 5 seconds to read this, or it's going to explode. There's part of me that wonders if maybe that's the future, because I'm sure that the South Korean Defense Ministry, I'm sure they thought it was under the best Kaspersky Labs software available. And is it mind-blowing to you that our government was using Kaspersky Labs, by the way? A Russian company. Does anyone find that weird? Does anybody else, find it bizarre that, you think about a lot of the computers, you think about a lot of our electronic voting machines, you think about all this stuff with Chinese parts and foreign parts just thrown into it without really knowing that, maybe you can program those things to send information back. Just kind of a thought. And I know, you're sounding really conspiratorial, Rick. No, it's not conspiratorial. Stop and think about what this means. You had 235 gigabytes of military documents stolen. 80% of them haven't even been identified yet. So we don't even know what it is that the North Koreans got. And I don't think that they know either. But evidently this took place in September of last year. In May, South Korea said a large amount of data had been stolen and that North Korea may have done it. Didn't give any idea of what it was. Now we know. It's been all of that war gaming. Now, of course, North Korea denies it, says, oh, you're fabricating lies. But you look at this stuff, and at some point, do we not figure out how not to do this? Now, I was watching CNN last night, and they had the guy who wrote Trump's Art of the Deal. And he's written another book, this time for himself, where he talked to a number of psychologists, like we do every Monday here on the program. We talk to Propane Jane about just how crazy and how certifiable our president is right now. And he talked to 21 people like Jane, and he came to the same conclusion that we've been saying for months. That he's a narcissist, he's unpredictable, he's dangerous, and it was this guy's assessment: be very afraid. Be very afraid. This guy has it in his head right now that he wants war, and that's where we're heading. And when someone like Corker comes out and says, "Hey, it's like adult daycare center there, and someone's missing their shift," that takes real heavy weight, because you have to look at people like Mattis, and when the most sane, rational person in the administration is nicknamed Mad Dog, do you not think that we have problems? Just kind of throwing that out there, because, I look at this and it's going to be my kids. My son's 11. We get into another 10-year war, and one where, look, they've got a lot of forces and a crazy guy who's willing to slaughter, half his population. It's going to be my kids. It's going to be your kids. And as I said yesterday on Twitter, I go, I'm okay. I'm all on board with going into North Korea as long as Ivanka, Donnie Jr., Eric, and when Barron turns 18, little Barron on the front lines. When they're right there front and center, okay, we'll talk about it. Until then, it's off the map. And I know, but he's a madman. He's going to have a bomb. Yeah, well, that's something the international community has to deal with. The rhetoric coming out of this White House, not helping. In fact, if I'm as quickly as possible developing a bomb just because of what we've seen in places like Pakistan. No one's screwing with Pakistan because they're a nuclear power. If I'm thinking the same thing. I get it. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, talk media news. Stick around.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day mill workers began to walk off the job at the Phoenix and Gilbert knitting mills in Little Falls, New York. The strike was sandwiched between the Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and the 1913 Patterson textile strike. American, Hungarian, Polish, and Italian workers, over 70% of them women, struck against wage reductions. Their hours had just been cut from 60 hours a week to 54, and their wages adjusted accordingly. A recent Factory Inspection Commission investigation revealed deplorable working and living conditions, among the worst in the state. As a result, state legislators passed protective legislation restricting women's work hours. Many social reformers pushed for laws like these in the hopes of improving women's quality of life by minimizing their exploitation on the job. But the reduction in hours spelled disaster for these mill women, who then faced a loss of income that ranged between 75 cents and $2 a week. Socialists in nearby Schenectady, including the socialist mayor George Lunn, arrived in town and were promptly arrested for giving open-air speeches in support of the strikers. IWW organizers soon followed to help organize picketing, daily strike parades, and strike committees for each of the factories. They quickly established IWW Local 801, the National Industrial Union of Textile Workers. By the end of the month, mounted police closed in on the women strikers and began clubbing them, many into unconsciousness. The police raided strike headquarters and arrested IWW strike committee leaders. But the women strikers stood strong and were celebrating victory by the end of the year. They won full reinstatement and 60 hours pay for 54 hours work. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Little, L-I-D-D-L-E, Little Bob Corker. I'm trying to figure out if that's an insult. I got the little Marco thing. I don't know what little, L-I-D-D-L-E is. Not sure what that is. Anyway, welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Little, I love that. Again, I think it's an insult. I think it's supposed to be an insult. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Michael Lesker, Talk Media News. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
You know, Donald Trump famously said, "I know the best words." Well, maybe he knows a new word here. It's L-I-D-D-L-E.
I know gooder words.
Yeah. He said, "I have a very good brain as well."
Yeah, and
maybe he's making up stuff.
Evidently, he thinks he's so smart that he wants to challenge himself, and he wants to challenge Rex Tillerson to an IQ test.
How about that? I guess I'll have to compare IQ tests, and I can tell you who's going to win, he said. And he's meeting with his Secretary of State in a couple of hours, and that should be an interesting battle of wits.
So does he get fired?
I don't know that that's going to happen today. That hasn't been whispered about, but, you know, the Washington Post had a story last week. They had 19 sources say that one way or another, Rex Tillerson is on his way out. But then, of course, there was that so-called suicide pact with Tillerson and Mnuchin and General Mattis saying that if any of the three were forced out, the other two would resign. We may be seeing if that actually is tested. So in the meanwhile, we've got this battle between the newly brave Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee, who, having announced his retirement, is free to speak what he perceives to be the truth about Donald Trump, talking about chaos at the White House, calling it an adult daycare, saying that every day at the White House it's a situation of trying to contain him, and saying this president could be leading us to World War III.
Yeah, but
the things that he's tweeted.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, you have a Republican senator who finally came out of the closet and said that. I mean, but it's what we've been hearing whispered for a very long time. I mean, look, it's a big deal that he came out and actually said it in public, but it's not something that I don't think we didn't already know.
Well, it's the kind of thing that other Republicans are whispering in private. He, having announced his retirement and being a multimillionaire who doesn't need a job to begin with, he is not worried about re-election. The others, many of whom are also millionaires and don't really need the job, but would rather have the job than say the honest thing for America, are, not exactly profiles in courage. They are not coming forward. What they are doing is not defending in public their president. You would think that at a time like this, where one Republican is openly criticizing the President of the United States, that other members of his party would be rushing to defend the President. You do not see that. There are no Republicans who are overtly defending Trump. Lindsey Graham went golfing with him yesterday. What do you think about Corker's remarks? And Lindsey Graham said, the president shot a 73.
Yep.
You do not see people coming out defending him. That in itself says a lot. And look, this president needs Bob Corker. These are two guys. This isn't a fight between Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump. This is a guy who was on Trump's short list for vice president.
Yep.
He was then a candidate for Secretary of State. There were some in Washington who felt he was closer to Trump than anyone else in the Senate. And now he's in the middle of this battle. Remember, Corker's not only a Republican, he's chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Trump needs his support if he tries to back out of this Iran nuclear deal. If Rex Tillerson leaves, which, as you said, is widely rumored, Trump needs Corker's support getting a replacement through. So he needs Corker more than Corker needs him. Will this give new voice to some of these other Republicans? I don't know. It's bad enough dealing with the things that this president says and does. Look what his vice president did over the weekend. Could you believe this?
Oh yeah, no, it was a great stunt. I mean, really,
the football stunt.
Yeah, it was a great stunt. It was a great PR move, and it would have been terrific had Trump not stepped all over it.
Well, and Pence made a big mistake too by sending out this tweet with his picture of him and his wife on it, and it said, "We're enjoying the game," and people immediately saw, wait a minute, that's a picture from 3 years ago. He couldn't even get that right. So look, let's just take a moment to think about this. You've got the NFL, which has always tried to align itself with patriotism and with the military,
even when it's purchased.
Exactly. You've got Jerry Jones saying any player on my Dallas Cowboys who kneels is off the team. This is a guy who doesn't care that he's got guys on his team with criminal records, got guys on his team who have beaten up their wives, who have domestic violence cases against them. That is okay, but you declare in the gentlest way by taking a knee during the national anthem, you declare that you don't like racial violence in America, and this is considered beyond the pale. None of these players, not one of them, has said, I'm doing this because I'm protesting the military, or I'm protesting against the flag, or I'm protesting the national anthem. Let's be honest about this, all right, Rick? All of these super patriots who have come out now saying, how dare they not stand at attention during the playing of the national anthem when the flags are flying? You've got thousands of these super patriots who, during the national anthem every week, they're back there in the men's room. They're back there buying hot dogs and Cokes and beers. They're back there, shooting a bull with their friends, while these guys are kneeling in the gentlest kind of silent protest against racial violence. Who's showing a lack of respect for the flag?
Yeah, but they're still standing, though.
Yeah, right. Some of them. By the end of the day, when they've had their fill of beers, they won't be.
No, I mean, look, that was And again, you have to give Trump credit for being, masterful in knowing what's going to keep the enraged enraged. And this is one of those things, and it's purely a racial thing. It is purely meant to divide us. And at no point did that little stunt do anything to move us closer together to make people want to stand for the flag. And again, the people who keep telling me that they believe in the Constitution and freedom, and they're the same people who say that if we question what the president does, we're wrong, and that we have to stand and we have to do all of these things. It's nuts.
It would have been, he could have made the same statement, Pence, by issuing a tweet saying, I don't believe these guys should be doing this during the national anthem. And instead of flying out to Indianapolis, flying out to Puerto Rico and helping the hurricane victims.
There you go.
Instead, you've got Donald Trump
saying, some paper towels.
Yeah, throwing out paper towels. Hey, you got a flood? Here's a paper towel. Talk about inadequate. But instead, you've got Donald Trump tweeting that there's so little appreciation for what I've done for Puerto Rico while he goes off golfing. This isn't about him. This is about Puerto Rico. So little appreciation. What have you done, Donald? You tossed out some paper towels.
Well, that's a lot of work. They were tremendous towels, though, Michael.
They were great towels, but not in the midst of a flood.
They're the best towels ever.
Yes,
look, but
good.
You know this by now. Everything has to come back to him. Even the protest on Sunday. Even Pence's little, political theater, the little bread and circus moment, which was, obviously pre-planned well in advance. Trump had to take credit for it. I told him to leave.
Yeah, it's always all about him. There's no getting around that. And it unraveled their whole little scheme there.
Yeah. So when do we start bombing North Korea?
He says, what was his line? There's only
one way to deal with them.
Sorry, only one thing will work with North Korea. And when he was standing there with his military leaders the other day, he said maybe this is the calm before the storm. They've asked him what he's meant by both remarks, and he says, you'll see. We don't know what that means. Look, if any other president had said such things, we'd be going, oh, my God. But we know that this guy is such a prisoner of his own impulses that what he says really doesn't matter. There was a piece the other day in the Washington Post. They've charted more than 1,100 times that he has bent the truth or broken it since he's taken office. 1,100 times.
Yeah, it's one of those things my mother used to call lies.
That's the word. That's the word. I was being polite here, but I don't know why.
I go back to, as a kid, every time I would lie, I'd get a backhand. I can't imagine my mother. I can't imagine what my mother would do to someone like Trump.
It is pitiful, but that's why I say that when he makes these remarks, we really don't know how seriously to take them because he says things, and in the batting of an eyelash, he changes his mind. Literally, from hour to hour, day to day, nothing lasts. So that when he now says that he's backing out of what Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer said, they had a deal on the Dreamers, the DACA, and now Trump says, no, we want to tie this in with some other stuff. That sends a message that he's changed his mind again. Who gets that message? Iran, because they see him backing out of the nuclear deal. Who else gets that message? North Korea, because they see him backing out of the Iran deal and the DACA deal and changing his mind every 45 seconds. And what is the value of making a deal when you've got a guy who changes his mind with every other impulse?
Yeah, he's a serial vacillator. All over the place all the time. And it all has to circular back to him. And, again, you look at some of the tweets today, attacking the woman from ESPN, attacking Bob Corker, attacking individuals. And you just go, while all of this chaos around the world is happening, if this is where his mindset is, wow. So last question I've got, because, I look at Corker and I go, is this the beginning of setting up a 25th Amendment case? Because this guy's crazy.
I do think, there is more talk about that than there has been. Imagine if you are North Korea and you are learning what you learn from what he tweets. You have got to be saying, oh, my God, this guy is unpredictable, which he wants them to think. But, with both sides with their finger on the button, and we just had Nicholas Kristof, the great New York Times columnist, he and 3 colleagues from the Times just came back from North Korea. They said there are military parades all the time now in the streets. There are billboards showing North Korean bombs dropping on American cities. They are taking this real literally.
Great. Good. Well, hey, bombing at 5 o'clock. Michael, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much, man.
All right, man. Take care.
Scary stuff. Yeah. And like I said, unpredictable is one thing. Unhinged, completely another. Quick break. Right back.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. National Nurses United in Puerto Rico, with its volunteer RN emergency response network, says that federal relief efforts are glacially slow. The nurses' union is warning of dire conditions threatening a growing health calamity for millions. They say while they hear boasts of great response, the reality on the ground is far different. That reality includes people who have yet to get any food, water, or other supplies from FEMA or any other agency. People standing in line for hours in blistering heat for water and food, only to find federal disaster officials bringing paperwork to collect data instead. A breakout of leptospirosis, a dangerous, deadly bacterial disease. The nurses say the harsh reality is a woefully inadequate government response in Puerto Rico. At least 120 Teamsters are on the ground in Puerto Rico trying to deliver relief supplies, but the Teamsters say it's even worse than it appears in media accounts. Traffic lights out. Much of the power still out. Very hot conditions. Teamsters General President Jim Hoffa says Teamsters volunteers are working in critical roles of supply delivery, sanitation support, hooking up generators, and debris removal following the devastation wrought by Hurricane Maria. Faculty at the University of Minnesota are shifting tactics in a push for worker power and organization at the university. The Minnesota Court of Appeals ruled in September barring tenured and non-tenured faculty from joining together in solidarity in one union bargaining unit. Minnesota Academics United, affiliated with SEIU Local 284, had filed for the union election back in January of 2016. Instead of appealing that court decision, faculty will instead form a workers' association. In a posted union video, faculty like Marta Shore explained some of the issues driving faculty to want to organize at the University of Minnesota.
In the past 10 years, I have seen class sizes increases and tuition increase. When I was a TA in 2005, our labs were 25 students, so I was responsible for 50 students. I got to know the students. The class I'm teaching this fall has 200 students.
Shared governance of the university is one of the principles at stake as faculty organizes. Christian Karab said one problem in higher ed is market-driven governance without sharing power with faculty.
Everything has to be understood in a business paradigm. That's fundamentally inconsistent with the whole idea of a public research institution.
WIN is America's multimedia news voice for workers.
We need to make more money. What they're paying us, the greedy corporations, they just want to pay us what they want to pay us. And it's not right.
We are sick of an economy and a democracy that are rigged against us.
Support WIN's worker news mission at workersindependentnews.com. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
The billionaires don't want you to vote this year. We'll send you a message that's loud and clear, that the votes can't be counted in your community. Why even register? Don't waste your energy.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So today, you may remember DEF CON, the big hacking conference that took place back in July, where it turns out that of the 25 different voting machines that they had, they could hack into all of them. They're going to release their findings today about just how vulnerable these machines are. And as they point out, look, these voting machines are made with foreign hardware and software. Still mind-blowing to me that the federal government was using Kaspersky Labs, a Russian company, to do some of their internet security stuff. Mind-blowing as it is, it's the kind of stuff that, well, we now live in a global community and free trade and, yeah, that. But again, it comes back to our elections safe? Is the ballot box sacred? I've been saying for years, give me a piece of paper, give me a marker, count them by hand. That simple. Anyway, here to talk about what's going on and maybe a little bit about the voting machines. Our good friend Andrea Chalupa is here. Andrea, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So DEF CON, all of them, every one of the 25 machines that they tried, they were able to hack into.
Yes, I mean, there's a reason why states like California and Virginia have moved away from using these voting machines. They're just completely reliable when it comes just for hacking. So if you can't depend on a machine, don't use it to vote. Voting is, of course, what preserves our democracy. If you have voting machines out there that we know are extremely vulnerable, then that is putting not only our democracy at risk, but voters themselves won't have faith in the system, and that can lead to all sorts of problems and unrest.
Yeah, I mean, just from right from the very beginning, and look, this is old news. It's arguments that I've been having for at least a decade now. I go to the ATM. The ATM spits out a piece of paper and tells me what I did. I go to vote and I get nothing. It seemed sane, rational on a certain level that, okay, if we have to use these damn machines, that we get a little piece of paper out, we go, yep, that's it. We put it into another box, and that you have at least a check on what the tally is. I mean, doesn't that seem at least a bit rational?
It's a joke. I mean, any election system that relies on these horrible voting machines is like a human being that relies on McDonald's for all of its meals. It's that unhealthy and that dangerous for any system. It's just poison. And just to sort of give an extreme example of what this could lead to, every single congressional testimony in regards, the experts who are called to Congress to testify in the Russiagate investigations, they kept saying repeatedly that Russia has not gone away. Russia is going to continue to use these same strategies on us in the 2018 election and beyond. So this is not what happened in 2016 is still happening. It's far from over. The Russian bots are still out there. The Russian propaganda is still out there and aggressive. They're going to get back into our voting systems, to try to manipulate the vote for the candidate that they would prefer. So we're basically just sitting ducks until this is fully resolved. And just to sort of frame an extreme example of how dangerous this is, it's been well reported that one of Russia's interests is to break apart the United States. So, for instance, that kid who spent a lot of time in Russia and is now pushing the whole Cal exit propaganda to try to get California to break off from the rest of the Union. A great way for Russia to speed, separatist movements along, as they like to do, is to take away all confidence in our election systems. So if states continue to use these totally unreliable and vulnerable voting machines, so these electrical voting systems, then Russia is just going to continue to create chaos with those systems and really chip away massively at people's confidence in their elections. And without confidence that you have the right to exercise your vote in your own state, that's going to really put a lot of frustration. People might say, "Screw this! Why don't we, why don't we start exploring? Why don't we take Cal exit seriously, for instance?" But California is safe because they don't have that. But I'm just saying, if you want to break apart the United States, destroy all confidence in America's elections, and that's something that Russia would definitely take advantage of if we continue to have these vulnerable voting machines.
Is there anything out there that says that that they were able to actually get in to the machines this time? Now I've seen reports that say that they tried to manipulate data, they tried to get into the voter rolls, they tried to do a bunch of stuff in I guess 21 of 28 states. Is there any evidence so far that they were actually successful in getting in and changing votes this time around? And I know that's probably the goal down the road, but is there any evidence that they were able to do that in the last election?
There's no evidence that they were able to change the results, the tabulations anywhere. There was, one of the computer scientists that worked really closely on the recounts. He did a piece for the Washington Post, where he said that the probability was just not there, that they were likely to change any, voting results. But if you read his actual report, in the summary, it says, we don't have enough information to really make a strong assessment. And so the reality is, so when you talk to computer scientists who are involved in the recounts, one major one, if you talk to any of these folks, what they'll tell you is you just can't prove either way. It's just impossible. So no one can definitively say either way whether they were successful anywhere. It's just the data is impossible to get, and it's just like the hodgepodge nature of how election systems are so different by county. Even you just can't tell. But what we do know out of the 21 states that Russia tried to mess with, there was Illinois where they were successful, and that was in regard to getting information on voter registration, getting information on voters. And so the issue is, though, we don't know what they would want that information for and how it was useful for them. There is one theory that's floating that Russia was able to, Russia grabbed or tried to grab voter registration files so they could have, voter data, and then maybe feed that along to their sources at Cambridge Analytica and whoever was working with the Trump and Facebook targeting ads, for instance, and just do really strong, sophisticated targeting that way. So we have no idea behind the scenes how this is all actually coordinated. But what we know for sure, without a doubt, is that our election systems are extremely vulnerable, and just enough isn't being done to address that.
Now, as we know, there are 4 committees on the Hill who are looking into this. You've got the Mueller investigation. Do you have any confidence that we get to the bottom of this, or does that sense of unrest lay there? Because look, I'm not thrilled with the idea that we don't know. We don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. That doesn't give me any confidence for next time around.
I am not confident we'll ever know. So if there is information out there, let's say the investigation center or something that is a major red flag that strongly indicates that, hey, they were able to be successful here. Even if it's a single county, that's major information that we need, so that needs to be addressed to really push this along. Because the big hurdle we're dealing with to plug up all these holes and have total confidence that our election systems are secure. The big hurdle we're dealing with is that you have secretaries of state across the country, who tend to be conservative, tend to be Republican, who don't want help from the Department of Homeland Security, who don't want help from the feds, who see, the feds calling election systems, extremely important infrastructure that must be protected and, therefore must get this federal funding. They see that as an overreach and something that steps on their state's rights. So you're dealing with that now. So even though the Department of Homeland Security, and even though, President Obama, before he left, made a lot of big pushes to try to safeguard our election systems, it all comes down to the state level. The states have to ask for the support, and the states have to be willing participants in strengthening their own system. And some states just aren't signing up for that. And so that's the real vulnerability, really, is the state level and the federal agencies being able to work together in a way that's productive and comprehensive and covers all of their bases. So we know without a doubt that these states are secure. So that's the big problem. Just to back to your other question, if there was any major red flag that showed the Russians were able to change voting numbers, voting results anywhere, I highly doubt that we would ever find that out. And that's simply because that would prove beyond a doubt that would just throw more sort of doubt into Donald Trump's presidency. There's already this growing movement, this growing feeling that Donald Trump is an illegitimate president. And if anybody was able to prove that the Russians are able to change voting results anywhere, even on a county or precinct level, that would just throw further fuel on the fire that this is an illegitimate president who was essentially installed by Russia. And that's the last thing that anyone in our federal government wants, because, as a union, we need to have confidence that the system works. We need to have confidence that our democracy was not overthrown. So even if there is any sort of red flag out there, they will never allow us to find it out.
Right.
I mean, they've been so secretive with this since the beginning. Even the states found out, the 21 states that Russia, targeted, those 21 states didn't get that information until a year later. So that's how sensitive this issue is. And I have to tell you that, when I talk about this out there in the open, when other people like Sarah Kendzior talks about this, we get attacked. We see a major uptick in the far-right trolls who are coming after us. So this is very clearly, this election hacking, this vote hacking is an extremely sensitive issue for the far-right movement in America that helped, elect Donald Trump. This is an extremely sensitive issue for the far right, for Donald Trump himself. So if it's so sensitive to them, if Donald Trump put so much money, knowing how notoriously cheap he is, if he pumped in so much money to shut down the recounts in those key states right after the election, if the New York Times is reporting that his Thanksgiving was ruined by the recount efforts, because that's all I obsessively think about, if I'm getting attacked massively with coordination every time there's big recount news that I'm pushing aggressively, because, I was somebody that worked with the Audit the Vote movement, if that's all happening, I think that's a major indication that that's where we need to be looking.
Yeah, well, there's smoke, there's fire. But, here's the thing. There's part of me and
where there's protests, where there's people who, maybe like protest too much and then try to really attack you and knock you down. That's they're basically telling you, like, don't go there. We're going to try to stop you from looking there. And that's where we need to keep looking.
Yeah, no, because there's part of me, Andrea, that would, I would feel better if the Russians had hacked the vote and changed the tallies, because that means, okay, it was stolen that way. Not just what we're being told is they were able to put some Facebook ads, and that we as a population are just plain freaking stupid.
Well, we as a population are just plain freaking stupid. I mean, that's part of it too. I mean, what Alex Halderman, one of the main computer scientists on the recount, what he warned us in an interview before the election, he said that if the election is close, it could easily get stolen. So anything that the Russians did, from the Facebook targeting to the election hacking, none of that could have made a difference unless the election was close to begin with. And some of the reasons why the election was so close to begin with included the fact that major broadcast media like CNN and even MSNBC focused primarily on the content, the little petty gossip in Hillary's hacked emails, that the Hillary campaign's hacked emails, rather than the fact that those emails were stolen Watergate style by Russian hackers. So you had CNN, Jeff Zucker's CNN, showing Trump's rallies in full as though they were like some Kardashian reality show. So, yeah, there's a lot of complicity in who helped elect Donald Trump. It wasn't just the Russians. It was also the abysmal treatment of Hillary's emails by the mainstream media. It was how Trump was given like a reality show in 2016 by the mainstream media. It was also, just failures. There's even shortcomings, of course, in Hillary's own campaign, that she should have been, more aware of this and come out even sooner against it. So there's a lot of factors that contributed to this happening, and of course, systemic racism in America, which is people just do not want to understand what Black Lives Matter meant for years. So I think this is on us too, and the Russians could not have been successful if the election wasn't close to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary stuff. But at the end of the day, we have this nightmare now because of whatever it is. And is there any information in this that would say that there was collusion? Because I know a lot of my right-wing trolls are assuming there's no collusion, there's nothing there, there's no there, and I keep going, well, I don't know. There seems to be he doth protest too much, Mr. President.
Oh, he's obsessed with the Russia investigations. Just like he was obsessed with the recount effort that came after him. This is his Achilles heel, and he knows it. I mean, he would fire Mueller if he could. And so, what people have to do now, if they want to, really push this further, and not only to get under Donald Trump's skin, but also to, expose everything that must be exposed so we can deal with it and protect our country election after election. But what everyone needs to do is follow March for Truth on Twitter. Go to the March for Truth website and, sign up for the newsletter and follow the calls to action that we have. So that's marchfortruth.info. So one of the most important calls to action we have is coming up this Wednesday, where we provide a script and a phone number for you to call your senators to demand that they support legislation that will protect Mueller's investigation in case Trump one night on Twitter decides to fire him over Twitter. So it's like, this is a president who's completely unstable. He's shown that to us repeatedly. So we all need to be vigilant and put pressure on our senators to protect the Mueller investigation. And so find out from marchfortruth.info, sign up on the newsletters to see how you're needed, when you're needed, so we can all stay vigilant and get as much truth as possible out of these investigations so we can prevent this from happening again.
No, I mean, ultimately that's the goal, to get to the bottom of this. Because look, yeah, I want to believe that the results that come out of our ballot box are the will of the people. And look, even I, knowing everything that I know and all this, still look at the office of the presidency with awe and with respect. And that, the guy that's in there, there's part of me that goes, you got to respect the office, even though the guy that's in the office is void of any respect. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, as soon as Americans lose confidence in their voting systems, that's going to plant, terrible seeds that could lead to major unrest that will only create further chaos. The end of America is the end of our elections. That's where it all ends for us. And Russia knows that. And that's why it's such a crisis that Americans are raising these questions seriously. And major experts are calling, that for, further investigations and further actions being taken. This is a major crisis that we're facing. As soon as we lose our elections, America's over. Yeah. And so any state, any Secretary of State that uses these vulnerable voting machines is putting our entire democracy, our entire union at risk. And Russia's just going to take advantage of that and just use it to create further chaos.
Scary, scary times. But I'm glad you're here to fill us in. I look forward to talking to you again next week as this continues, and I'd love to hear about the event with the March for Truth folks.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Rick.
Good stuff. Andrea Chalupa. Again, you want to check out her website and the work. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. At 2:02 in the afternoon, President Woodrow Wilson at the White House touched off an explosion at the Gamboa Dike in Panama. With that touch of a button, the last barrier to joining the waters of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Panama Canal went up in smoke. The Chicago Tribune described the scene in Panama, writing, quote, "Then suddenly came the muffled roar of the discharge of 1,600 pounds of dynamite, which sent a shower of water, mud, and rock high into the air. Spreading out as it went upward, the whole heavily veiled into a cloud of smoke. As water began to pour through the rent made by the explosion, the crowd sent up a great cheer. It was a noteworthy moment in the construction of the canal, but that moment came at a staggering cost of workers' lives. For more than 20 years, the French and then the United States worked on the canal project. The U.S. phase lasted for a decade. As many as 45,000 workers toiled on the canal during the peak years of construction. These workers came from the United States, Europe, Asia, and Panama. West Indians formed the core of the work crews. These workers faced stifling heat, brutal working conditions, and poor accommodations. Workers had to contend with ravaging disease, poisonous snakes, and torrential rains. Workers also faced racial discrimination. For example, West Indian workers earned half the hourly wages of U.S. and European workers. They also lived in much more crowded barracks. Worker deaths were so frequent that death or funerary trains made continual runs to bring the bodies away from the construction site. It is estimated that more than 27,000 men died building the canal.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
A new paper released by the Brookings Institute. Now, Brookings, they're center of the road. You're going to hear people, oh, no, they're center of the road. They're one of these think tanks. They really try to be in the middle of the road. They have just published a paper that is making the case for impeachment, where they have meticulously detailed Trump's obstruction of justice around the firing of FBI Director Comey. The report published by Norm Einzen, Barry Burke, and Noah Bookbinder detail every, almost one of those moment by moment, tweet by tweet. The great thing about this presidency that historians are going to love in 100 years or in 1,000 years or, whenever. Imagine if George Washington had Twitter, that you could, at every moment of every second of every day, you could get an account of what he was thinking. I mean, imagine how fascinating that would be to a historian. In 100 years, they're going to look back at all of the tweets that Trump keeps throwing out, and they're going to look back on us for this. We will be judged. History is watching, and it's not going to be kind. There will be no kind history. But as they point out in their writing, President Trump's behavior is certainly suggestive of corrupt intent with respect to the Russia and Flynn investigation. They continue, for example, President Trump has articulated multiple shifting rationales for Comey's firing. The first explanation, and you may remember this, they write for terminating Comey, the first explanation as articulated by the president in a May 10th tweet and in the Rosenstein memo was that Comey was mishandling the investigation into Hillary's emails. I know, the emails, the damn emails. I would love to know where the investigation into Jared and Ivanka's emails, where that's going. Anyway, he said that he had lost confidence in his subordinates. Soon thereafter, President Trump reversed course and said that the Russia investigation was on his mind when he made the decision. Now, look, we lived through all this. We've seen in real time on tape him vacillate between excuses. I argue that the Russia investigation was part of it. I argue that the fact that Comey wouldn't swear loyalty and kiss the ring, that's a big part of it. But ultimately, I have to think that it comes back to the Russia investigation. It comes back to, look, Comey wasn't dropping looking into Flynn. Wasn't going to happen. So you've got this 103-page report put out by the people with the pointy hats there at the Brookings Institute. Well worth a couple of hours to look through. Heavily notated, lots of references. And you got to wonder, with what's going on Capitol Hill, with Mueller, with all the different investigations. Will ultimately this be what brings Trump down? And again, it comes back to, even if you argue Trump did nothing with the Russians, even if you argue, as Greg Jarrett over at Fake News says, it's one of the greatest hoaxes ever, even if you buy that, it's the cover-up, again, that ends up getting you. And the firing of Comey, to me, is that cover-up attempt. Even if there was nothing there, it's that appearance. And that ultimately could be what brings him down. So it will be most certainly very interesting to see how this plays out. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I like to focus on candidates, people running for office, moving us in the right direction. I would argue dumb enough to jump into the political realm and fight the fight, especially here in Pennsylvania, one of the most gerrymandered states in the entire country. But I give credit to people who are willing to stand up, step forward, and throw out their ideas. When we come back, Tom Prigg's going to be here. He's a Democratic candidate for Pennsylvania's 12th congressional district. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1933. That was the day that 40 armed cotton growers shot at a group of striking workers in the small town of Pixley, California. That year, a wave of labor unrest had swept through the fields of California's agricultural industry. Nearly 50,000 workers participated in strikes throughout the year. The Agricultural Workers' Industrial Union led many of the strikes. The American Federation of Labor also led 2 walkouts. Workers were angry over declining wages and the harsh working conditions of agricultural life. The Depression had slashed wages. Cotton field workers in the San Joaquin Valley had seen their wages cut by as much as 75%. 3/4 of those workers were Mexican. As cotton harvest season neared, the workers organized to strike. They demanded $1 for every 100 pounds of cotton they picked, and recognition of their union. The growers offered 60 cents. At the peak of the strike, an estimated 12,000 to 18,000 workers had walked off the job. Anger mounted. Armed growers attacked striking workers, demanding they return to work or leave California. Strike leaders were arrested. In Pixley, the growers formed a Farmers Protective Association. They claimed to have as many as 600 members. Reportedly, one manager of a cotton gin told the farmers, "The time has come for us to take the law into our own hands and drive the strikers from our farms." The simmering tensions boiled over. As highway patrolmen looked on, a band of growers shot into a group of unarmed strikers. At least 2 strikers fell dead. The violence resulted in public outcry and federal intervention. The workers received federal relief, and a mediator helped to settle the strike. And in the settlement, the workers would receive 75 cents per 100 pounds of cotton. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. I'm Rick. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So the president today says the pen, he's going to use the pen to finish off health care. If he can't get the Republicans to come forth with their horrible plan, he's going to work to make it worse. And we know the executive order is going to be to open up health care, to exempt the associations who buy, small groups, exempt them from the essential benefits, thus basically destroying the Affordable Care Act and, insurance for millions of people across the country. But that's okay. Some good news out of the Trump Department of Labor, however. Workers who are unionized, 94% of them have access to employer-based health care, while only 33% of non-union members have access to health care on the job. Coincidence? I think not. Lots to get to. Anyway, as I said in the last segment, I always respect people who are willing to step up, stand up, and throw their hat into the ring, especially here in Pennsylvania, one of the most gerrymandered states in the entire country. That's why I've asked Tom Prigg to come talk with us. He's a Democratic candidate for the 12th Congressional District here in Pennsylvania. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, the question I ask everybody who's dumb enough to jump into this stuff, why? Why? I mean, as badly gerrymandered as this state is, why are you doing it?
I'm doing it basically because we don't have representation in Washington. The only people that have the power to actually make the changes that we need are the very people who benefit from the way things are. What's their incentive to ever change anything?
Yep.
And that's what happened. Is I looked at this and I said, you know what? I have to become one of these lawmakers in Washington to actually write the laws that we need. I got tired of, our children. They're taking away CHIP. It's fine to starve children. It's fine to take away health care and let people die of illness. It's fine to ship jobs overseas. I can't stand it anymore. And what else am I going to do? I can't sit back.
No, look, At the end of the day, we need angry people to step up and step forward as you've done. And like I said, good on you. I just like to know what people's motives are, because you threw a couple of things out there that grabbed me. The fact that the Party of Family Values still has not reauthorized the Children's Health Insurance Program, to me is one of those things that should be criminal, not just immoral.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. My sisters and I grew up in poverty. And a lot of times our only meal was free school lunch. I know what that kind of weight is like, trying to go through school on a hungry stomach, going to sleep with hunger pains. And how can you do that to a child? Like, consciously do that to a child? And where exactly what you're saying? Where are the family values in that?
But what they would argue, Tom, and look, I think our history, our backgrounds are probably somewhat close to similar. What they would argue is, you're doing fine now. You pulled yourself up by the bootstraps. That's what you should be doing. You didn't need any help, Tom. You did it all yourself.
Yeah, I went to the military. I'm a veteran. I used a GI Bill to get through college. It was a struggle. And here's the other thing, right? I grew up. I was born in 1970. I grew up, and when I was graduating college, there were more opportunities. Now they're shipping jobs overseas. There's less opportunities.
Yep.
So the ability for people to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, they're taking those opportunities as well. So they're taking away the very thing that they're complaining that people aren't doing. Well, how are they going to do it if the jobs aren't here?
I would even argue that, again, I don't know your background as well as I maybe should, but I would argue when you graduated from college, you weren't saddled with a lifetime of debt either.
No, well, I had a law job, not too much because of my military service, but yeah, I had to work it off. And it's amazing that they want these kids to come out of college with basically a house mortgage, without earning a house, going into an entry-level position, and a lot of the jobs, like, there isn't a lot of job opportunities, and the wage opportunities aren't there, because of the unfair trade agreements and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's amazing how much they've turned the odds against the American people.
So as a representative, and look, I'm not a big fan of the guy who's sitting in that seat, the incumbent Rothkus. What do you do? What's the first piece of legislation you move forward? Because, look, I like the idea. We need to get education for kids. We need jobs for workers. We need safe environment. We need a whole bunch of stuff. How do you get to that point?
Well, first, I don't work on on a single piece. I'm going to form committees. I got 5 points for economic strength, and one is the job training. I want to have the union apprenticeship programs as a big part of that.
Yep.
Another one is saving the small businesses that do exist in these areas. I want a renewable energy sector, a new one, because that will bring back. We can have a lot of manufacturing jobs. We can have R&D. We can provide jobs from the high school level to the PhD. I want to use subsidies and tax credits to move businesses, make a new law where your subsidies and tax credits are dependent on how economically depressed an area is. So the more economically depressed it is, the larger the subsidies. disincentivizes going into low-income areas where people really need the jobs. Enough with going to San Francisco and New York all the time. It's time to get them out in places like my District 12 where we need them.
No,
and then there's also right to work in the unions. I got a ton of those as well.
Right. No, I mean,
We
look,
need unions.
a lot of that sounds great stuff. I mean, the first one, using the apprenticeship programs. I mean, the Obama-era Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act was meant to do just that. The sad reality is the Trump administration is going to probably gut that entirely, because what it meant to do is do just what you were saying, get job training to folks through apprenticeship programs that you don't have to take out a lifetime of debt. In fact, that you actually get paid while you're learning, which seems sane and rational to me. It would be great to have someone sitting in Congress who actually knows what it's like to have to work for a living instead of the millionaires club that we've got now.
Exactly. And I ain't going to put a lot of people at task. I'm going to say, you know what? We, as a Democratic Party, we got a lot of labor support. Well, you know what? We need to support labor. We need to get behind it and actually start passing laws and pushing these laws and making a large issue on it. Right to work should even be up, to be honest. There's just not enough pushback on that. The trade laws, policies are ridiculous about how we allowed China to undercut us with their subsidies, their junk metal, their poor wages, the poor environmental standards. All of this is undercutting the U.S. economy, and we sit back and let them do it. And this has to stop.
Now, isn't that what the guy sitting in the White House ran on, though? I mean, wasn't that going to be day one? Currency manipulator, day one. You know, we're going to take on that trade deficit. We're going to solve that. Wasn't that? Did I forget something? Did I miss something?
It was Ivanka got her 60 patents overnight, and suddenly, I forgot about that. I don't remember doing that.
Yeah, I mean,
but
you look at it's crazy. And look, I think the platform that you're running on is the right one. Look, this is where, I gave Trump credit. He understood what working people needed. He understood what they were talking about. Now, granted, he's not going to do anything. It would be great to have someone who understands what the issues are and then actually, does something.
And that's what I tell people. I tell people it resonated because it was true. It wasn't true of his intentions, though. And that's the difference. He knew what the people needed and what they wanted to hear, and he just said it.
Yeah. So the question is, how can we help? Look, I look at your district, and it's like many in Pennsylvania, heavily gerrymandered. What can people do to help?
Well, they can visit my website. Is humphreyforcongress.com. Donations would be fantastic. Volunteering would be fantastic. Even spreading my website. Joining the Facebook, the Twitter, every little bit helps. It's amazing that something that sounds so small could help out. More exposure means more support. And I'm not going to take corporate money, and I'm not wealthy. I told you about my background. So I don't have a Rolodex of millionaires. So it's going to take really the people to elect somebody that's actually running for the people. I know this sounds very cliche coming out of a politician, but I'm not. I'm a neuroscientist by profession. I work full time still. So this isn't about some guy who's been in the political scene for a while. So those are the things that can really, really help me a lot. I also have a town hall meeting on October 26th in Johnstown, where I'm going to invite anybody and everybody. If you're in the area, you want to come down, that would be fantastic. I want to get as many diverse people as I can and get people to air how they're feeling and see where we can start talking about where we can meet on some ideas.
It sounds like all good stuff. And look, the reality is we need people who are going to stand up for the working people. Now, as a veteran, I mean, you're seeing a lot of these veteran issues popping up. I wanted to get your thoughts on the push to privatize the VA. I mean, we've been hearing from the right wing for a very long time that we need to privatize it. In fact, we know that I think the number was 33,000 positions within the VA are not being filled. I'm curious what your position there is.
This is what the Republicans do. They defund until it becomes so dysfunctional that they say, oh, see, government doesn't work and we got to privatize because there's money to be made. That's what this is about. I am not for privatization. The only thing I even close to being amenable to is the having vouchers for veterans who are so far out where a trip to the VA may be 70 miles, 100-mile drive. I can understand that, but not privatization. privatization is privatizing our veterans. You know, we try to privatize our children with the vouchers at school. We try to privatize the health care. They just see us as a cash cow. I am completely against this.
Well, since you brought up the vouchers, I mean, again, this is another one of those issues on the education front because, you know, I'm a believer in, you know, every child has the right to the Pennsylvania Constitution is a thorough and efficient public education. It just seems like a lot of our public dollars are going to private institutions that are failing our kids.
Yeah, exactly. There's a study in 2016, Louisiana, where they followed kids leaving the public, going to going private with a voucher, and these kids went from the 50th percentile in mathematics and dropped to 25th percentile. They got worse. And every study that's come out with vouchers, whether you're talking about the 2017 or late 2016 Ohio study, every single one you see math and reading, these kids drop. And this is about, you know, if we got the money, if the public systems are failed, fix it. You know, fix what we have. We have the infrastructure. We can do this. The problem is it's not making a bunch of millionaires big money, and that's what it really is.
Yeah, and again, you know, those are the messages that I think people need to hear. And I think it's so important that folks like you throw your hat into the ring with the life experiences that you've had, because, you know, I look at what's coming out of D.C. I look at what comes out of these politicians' mouths, and it's, you know, I guess it's who's been putting money in their pockets, which brings me to the money part of all of this. You're going to be outspent, you know, probably $1 million to one. You know, how do you overcome the financial advantage of incumbency and you know, the millionaire money that your opponent has?
Yeah, he's funded by the Koch brothers. He's a millionaire himself, corporate lawyer. Well, I asked myself this. That's why I started this 4 years ago, to really learn how to do this. And what's money buy you? It buys you leverage. And what's it leveraging? Face recognition, name recognition, right? Getting out there.
Right.
I reach out. I'm on your radio show right now. I'm doing a town hall meeting. I'll do one in every county. I do a lot of things. Social media. I also pull from nationwide. Can you donate to my campaign? This is what I stand for. This is what I'm doing. So, yeah, he'll outspend me, but he has to outdo me on name recognition. And that's a problem for him, because I started 2 years early for that very reason, that I realized to make up the money in dollars, I had to get boots on the ground and make up in footsteps and door knocks. And that's what I'm doing.
No, I mean, I look at that district as an opportunity for working people, and it's mind-blowing to me that in the western part of the state, home of the steel workers, home of, you know, all, you know, the destruction brought on by deindustrialization, that someone like Rothkus can possibly be sitting in that seat.
It's unbelievable. He's losing support, though. There are so many people who are Republican that come to me. I've had Republicans donate to me. They're telling me that they're fed up with him. At best, the only people I found big supporters have been Republican committee members. His supporters are like, yeah, I vote for Rothkus. He's a good guy. Doesn't really do anything. They recognize that. I guarantee they'll come back. If you look at my district, we've had 3 Democrat congressmen over the same topography, Kritz, Altmaier, and Murtha. So people will vote over if they see the kind of person that they want, you know, and that's what I'm trying to give them, or hopefully I'm giving them.
No, I wish you nothing but the best. I'd love to have you come back and talk to us again as the campaign continues and as things heat up.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Tom, great talking with you. Again, keep in touch.
Will do. I will for sure.
Thanks so much. Tom Prigg. Again, the website, tompriggforcongress.com. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. You can also follow him on Twitter. We'll get the links to all of that as well. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We gotta take the bastards down.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day mill workers began to walk off the job at the Phoenix and Gilbert knitting mills in Little Falls, New York. The strike was sandwiched between the Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and the 1913 Patterson textile strike. American, Hungarian, Polish, and Italian workers, over 70% of them women, struck against wage reductions. Their hours had just been cut from 60 hours a week to 54, and their wages adjusted accordingly. A recent Factory Inspection Commission investigation revealed deplorable working and living conditions, among the worst in the state. As a result, state legislators passed protective legislation restricting women's work hours. Many social reformers pushed for laws like these in the hopes of improving women's quality of life by minimizing their exploitation on the job. But the reduction in hours spelled disaster for these mill women, who then faced a loss of income that ranged between 75 cents and $2 a week. Socialists in nearby Schenectady, including the socialist mayor George Lunn, arrived in town and were promptly arrested for giving open-air speeches in support of the strikers. IWW organizers soon followed to help organize picketing, daily strike parades, and strike committees for each of the factories. They quickly established IWW Local 801, the National Industrial Union of Textile Workers. By the end of the month, mounted police closed in on the women strikers and began clubbing them, many into unconsciousness. The police raided strike headquarters and arrested IWW strike committee leaders. But the women strikers stood strong and were celebrating victory by the end of the year. They won full reinstatement and 60 hours pay for 54 hours work.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
From UN headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. The international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, known as ICAN, has won this year's Nobel Peace Prize. The Norwegian Nobel Committee applauded the group for highlighting the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons use and for leading efforts to create a treaty banning nuclear weapons. That treaty was signed this year by 53 countries, though only 3 have ratified it: Thailand, Guyana, and the Vatican. Suffice it to say, the treaty faces major headwinds, including strong pushback from the U.S. and every other nuclear weapons state. Earlier this year, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley mocked those behind the treaty, saying they didn't understand the role nuclear weapons play in making the world safer.
As a mom, as a daughter, there is nothing I want more for my family than a world with no nuclear weapons. But we have to be realistic.
But U.S. opposition didn't deter ICAN's executive director, Beatrice Finn, who spoke to Talk Media News this summer about the value of the nuclear ban treaty.
Basically, we think that this can set a norm, and it can change behavior even if states with nuclear weapons don't sign on to it. And we've seen them being very effective in the treaties that prohibit other weapons, like the Landmines Treaty, for example. The United States has never been a party to that treaty, but has still decided to follow the rules of the Landmines Treaty. Just like climate change, this is not an issue we can just look to 1 or 2 or 3 states to solve. They're not going to solve it. We have to solve it together. And this treaty is a good starting point. It's a basis to work on to delegitimize nuclear weapons and make them much more unattractive and unwanted than they currently are today.
The nuclear weapons ban treaty will go into effect once it's ratified by 50 countries. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
The website, TomPrigForCongress.com. I'm always fascinated by what motivates people to, who've got good lives. I listen to a neuroscientist willing to give up his weekends, and you look at the pictures of a beautiful family smiling and happy and all of that, and you go, what is it that makes someone go, you know what? I'm going to run for Congress. I'm going to throw my hat into the ring. I'm going to take the arrows. I'm going to take the assaults. I'm going to fight the fight in a fight where, basically you got one hand tied behind your back because the district is so badly gerrymandered. Again, I give him credit, because at the end of the day, I've been saying for a long time, those are the districts that you have to fight the hardest in. Those are the places where, as he points out, when he's talking to Republicans, they're not thrilled with what's going on. They're not thrilled with what the Republicans are putting forth. And I've had these conversations, hundreds of times, where, Republicans go, well, I'm not thrilled, but the Democrats are worse. And you go, well, what is it that's worse about it? And when you start talking about ideas and going, okay, instead of, just the polar opposite of I'm a D and you're an R and we have to hate each other, what about how we move the country forward? When I point out, and I've used this a lot, when I point out that union members have much higher rates of employer-sponsored health insurance and pension plans, non-union workers go, wow, I didn't know that. When you see the numbers as from the Trump Labor Department, 94% of union members have access to health care on the job, as opposed to 33% of non-union workers. Think about that for a second. If there was ever a billboard that should be it. And I talked to Republicans who are the most anti-union people you ever meet. They're horrible. They support gays and immigrants, and they're terrible. They're no good. You start going, whoa. I don't know about all that. What I do know is health care. I know pensions. I know a voice on the job. I know you're not going to be fired for no reason whatsoever. And it's pure democracy. If you don't like what's going on, become a member and change it. You look at all of this stuff, and it's mind-blowing to me how well the wealth class has divided us. Now, there's all this talk of Russia. Russia's, involved in our elections and meddling and doing all this stuff. The Russians basically just learned what the wealth class have done to us. The fact that, as Andrea Chalupa said earlier in the hour, that, there's this secession movement in California funded by the Russians, does not surprise me. Doesn't surprise me that wouldn't surprise me if they were behind a secession movement in Texas. Wouldn't surprise me. Our fault lines are there. The question is there someone who can bring us back to somewhere near sanity? Look, in my lifetime, we've always had political back and forth. We've always had, this kind of fighting that goes on. But at some point, there was still people in those elected offices who said, hey, how do we move the country forward? How do we get something done? Look, the guy who's sitting in the White House right now is not that guy. The people who are in power right now are not those people. They're not going to move us in the right direction. In fact, what they're looking forward to is how do they profit? How do they tear us apart even more so that we don't organize? And I've said this for years. The wealth class and the political classes have figured out really well how to keep us separated. Because look, this 94% of union members with health care, access to health care, is huge. If that ever got out, all of those people who don't have health care would be going, hey, why doesn't my job have it? Or the people who work in, and I'm still mind blown, the guy showed me his benefit package. $15,000 a year out of a $50,000 salary. He has to pay for health care. $15,000 a year. And we wonder why people are angry. If we could channel that anger, because look, as I talked about with Tom Prigg, Trump was right on a couple of those issues. People are angry about bad trade deals. People are angry about some of the stuff that goes on. He never intended on fixing it, but how do we focus that anger? That's the question. And what I see coming out of the right wing, what I see coming out of the White House is nothing but division, nothing but divide and conquer. That simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If anything during the show got under your skin, got you thinking, got you mad, got you happy, whatever, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you get the podcast. the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Have a great day. We will see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide flood beneath